Hiya, so welcome to the next module on business structure. So as I mentioned at the beginning, some of the content is a little more suited to UK business startups, and this is one of them really, although I'm sure there are similarities that in the UK we have a limited business, which is a business which is legally a separate entity to you as a person, and we also have a self-employed, which is an individual business. So I think there are some similarities, but this is more specific for the UK. So the main types of, the two main types of businesses we have is essentially a limited company and a sole trader. So the difference between the two, another term for sole trader is a self-employed person, just in case there's some confusion if you spoke to friends or you've looked online. So you've got a limited company and you've got self-employed. So to throw into the mix with a self-employed person is a partnership. A partnership is essentially a self-employed person, but you're also working with other self-employed people. So two self-employed people working together in a business is a partnership. It's a partnership of two. And you can have a partnership of 10. You know, as far as I'm aware, there's no limitation. But typically most self-employed people are sole traders, it's just yourself, and that's a very popular vehicle to start a business, a sole trader or self-employed person, because it's the easiest thing to start. You can literally start it with a phone call. So we're going to talk about registrations in a bit more detail, but you can, in theory, just register the business with a phone call to HMRC to get started. You'd probably be on hold for an hour, or you can do it all online. So it's a fairly simple process, although it's like anything in this world. It's simple if you know what you're doing. Sometimes you could be literally just ticking the wrong box, but you could be up and running within a few days, self-employed, and it's fairly easy. Limited company is a different legal entity. So limited company is not you registering as self-employed. You're setting up a completely different business. It's called incorporation. So it's recognised by Companies House, and legally it's not you. You're connected to the business. So it can be your business, you own that business, you'll be the director most commonly, and maybe the shareholder, so you own that business. But legally it is a different entity. So that's the two main differences. Sole trader and self-employed person is you as a business. Limited company is legally a separate entity. So you might question, and we do get asked this a lot as a firm of accountants, but as a new business startup, you might be wondering, should I be a limited company? Should I be a sole trader? There's not a right or wrong answer, really. It's not as simple as saying, yes, you should be limited. It depends on your circumstances. So there's three main reasons why we historically, or what I would suggest historically, you would consider being a limited company. So I'm just going to write those down. Okay, so in no particular order, although number one used to be the most popular reason for going limited, is there are potentially some tax savings. This course is not designed to go really heavy on the tax, but there are some tax savings because traditionally, as a limited company, you pay yourself a low salary, just like a PAYE person. So if you're employed, you've had a pay slip, and you would pay yourself in the same way as a limited company, and you'd pay the rest of the money as a dividend. And a dividend is essentially the profits from the business. So any profit you make, and there's a calculation to figure out what your profit is, what's left after tax and any other things is essentially available to the shareholders, and you pay yourself as a dividend. It's basically the profit. So there were some tax savings because up until a few years ago, that there was no tax on dividends up to the higher rate tax bracket, but that's all changed. We won't go into specifics right now on this course, the Kickstarter course, because that's covered in the business growth program. But there can still be some tax savings, okay? So in some cases, it's not as obvious and not as common, but there still can be some tax savings being limited, although for most smaller businesses, not necessarily the case nowadays. Status. So this doesn't affect a lot of our clients really in Cheltenham Tax Accountants, but for some businesses they like the whole kudos of being a limited company because it sounds posh, it sounds more important. There's a record on Companies House, so if you go on to Google and type in Companies House and then click on Find Company and search for the companies, your company will be on Companies House. Whereas if you're not a limited company, there's no official record online apart from your website and your advertising and your Facebook, all that kind of stuff. So there can be a bit of a kudos, and also some big customers or big suppliers, they feel more comfortable dealing with a limited company because they know that you're officially registered. They can check your information, they can check your address, they can check you're the person who runs the business, you're the director or you're the owner. With a self-employed person, there's not actually anywhere to check. HMRC have all that information, so there can be this sort of status thing being limited. Despite that, for a lot of smaller businesses, it's not relevant. If you're, a local business and you're dealing with the public, if you're let's say you're a fast food restaurant, or let's say you're a chippy, for example. Does your customer care if you're VAT registered? If you're a limited company, if I go into the chip shop as Mr. Joe Blogs and I ask for a bag of chips, does it matter to me that they're a sole trader or they're a limited company? It doesn't really make any difference. So it's more if you're business to business and your customers are businesses themselves, then it might be of significance, the status of being a limited company. Apart from that, not really, to be honest. Protection. So as I said, a limited company is a separate entity to you as an individual. So you do get more protection legally. There are exceptions, but generally there is an extra layer of protection being a limited company. So if you've done nothing wrong as the director of the business and as the shareholder of the business, and you've always tried to act in the best interest of the business and not yourself, then generally if you owe any money out to, let's say to the authorities, to the tax man, then your house could be protected because you and the business are two separate entities. There are exceptions to that, and we're not giving legal or tax advice on this video, but there are instances where you are more protected. There's definitely an extra layer of protection being a limited company. To balance that out, if you're looking to get finance with a bank or any other lender, they're probably going to look for what's called a director's guarantee. So that means even if you're a limited company, you still need to sign off and sign the dotted line to act as a guarantor, to say if my limited company doesn't pay this debt, I will have to be liable, and then they can still come after your house. So it's not as as clear as it seems, but certainly there's added protection being a limited company, and potentially that can save people a lot of money if there's issues in the future. And as we mentioned, that is a feasible thing to happen because 90% of new businesses fail in the first 10 years. You don't want that to happen, but it's a bit of an extra security blanket for you. So if that's the case, if there's benefits in being limited, what's the benefit in being a sole trader? So if I just jot some off the top of my head, some of the benefits of being a sole trader or partnership, or another word is an unincorporated business. So it's quick and easy to set up. There's less things to set up, it's less complex. As I said, in theory it can just be a phone call. It's very straightforward. You set it up and you get a registration number for being a self-employed person. That's definitely an advantage initially. Okay, so BK I've abbreviated for bookkeeping. So potentially there's less formal requirements for your bookkeeping system. So there's easier bookkeeping if you're a sole trader. There's huge changes happening in the UK at the moment with MTD, also known as Making Tax Digital. And that's all about digitalising bookkeeping and people's records. So they're trying to move towards everything being updated on a regular basis, literally daily. We as an accounting practice are trying to look after at least monthly for our clients. But historically, lots of people only have to submit something once a year. And as it stands, that is the case for non-VAT registered self-employed people. So that means you've got less bookkeeping requirements, because also you don't necessarily have to have a separate bank account if you're not a limited company. If you're a limited company, you need a separate designated bank account, and you need to account for everything going in and out of that bank account. If you're a sole trader, your bookkeeping can potentially be as simple as, here's all my income, here's all my sales on a tab of a spreadsheet, here's all my expenses. So we do have a bookkeeping course, which is a free bonus course if you signed up for the Kickstarter program, which covers all of this in far more detail. But that's one perk, potentially, being a sole trader. So I've said easier taxes, so it's easier taxes or easier to pay yourself. So when you're a limited company, you pay yourself in various different ways. And I mentioned salary, I mentioned dividends, and also the business pays tax. And we do have a tax module, we'll talk about this in a bit more detail. But you pay yourself in different ways, because when you're a self-employed person, you just take the money out of the bank and you don't need to label it anything. You can just, money's in your bank, I'm going to pay myself, it's the weekend, it's the end of the month, I've got to pay my bills. There's less restrictions and less formality in terms of paying yourself. So that does make it a lot more straightforward to understand how you pay yourself and what your tax is. So there's definitely an advantage in that. So to summarise, is there a standout reason for being a limited company or self-employed? We couldn't answer that for you, because as you can see, there's pros and cons to each. There are certain situations where you need to speak to your accountant to ask them, do you think there's an argument for tax for me being a limited company? And there are some instances, and that's not what this course is about, but there are certain instances where it makes more sense to be one or the other. The one thing I will say is most small businesses probably start on a self-employed basis or a sole trader, because they don't know what the future holds. They don't know how successful the business is going to be, because running a limited company is actually more costly. So that's actually a negative of being a limited company. So I've just put a minus sign next to cost, because being a limited company is more expensive. So most small businesses, they don't really know how much revenue they're going to bring in, so there's less cost, there's less investment. And I mentioned in the research module, speculate to accumulate, that although I'd recommend speaking to an accountant, you don't want to go all in and waste all your cash reserves and things you don't need to. So one advantage is definitely the cost in being a sole trader. So that there's not a right or wrong answer for you. That where you might want to be a limited company straight away is if there's other people involved in the business. So let's say you've got huge, we're mainly talking about smaller businesses with this Kickstarter course, but let's say you've got big plans, Dragon's Den type arrangements where you've got these investors who invest in a lot of money into your business, then they probably want you to be a limited company because they can buy a share in your business. So, let's say, for example, this pie chart represents 100% of the business. If you're a limited company and you're getting investment by someone like one of the dragons off Dragon's Den, then they could be a 25% shareholder and you could be a 75% shareholder. So a limited company gives you more flexibility and it gives them more security with their entitlement to a proportion of the business. You can have arrangements being self-employed, but it's not really suited to that form of investment. So that's definitely an advantage being limited if there's other people involved in the business. Another reason is if you've got huge plans, whether you've got another investor or not, but you've got these huge grand plans for the business and it basically is such a big scale, it does not make sense to be self-employed, because really self-employed is designed for you being the business generally. So if you know you're going to go big really quick, then being limited from day one, there's a lot of sense in that. And there can be some more specific circumstances to do with tax, VAT, and other factors to consider, but I'd probably recommend speaking to your accountant. So hopefully, yeah, that's gave you a bit of an idea of the different business structures. There are some other ones, but we're not going to go into detail in those for the purpose of this, because it's not really that relevant. There's basically non-profit organisations. So you've got a community interest company, you've got a charity. So there are other structures, but for the purpose of this course, we're talking about people that their view is to make a profit. So generally, you're looking at whether to go self-employed or whether to start a limited company. And I hope that's been really helpful, and look forward to seeing you on the next module.